All right, so I'll start. So the theme of today was focusing on cyber insurance and risk control and machine learning for insight in cybersecurity and situational awareness. We are now going to have a keynote with Dr. Phillippa Spencer. We will then have a 30-minute break, and then we will go on for track 5, workshop on cyber insurance and risk controls, and then track 6, cyber threat intelligence, OSINT, and cyber microbiome. And finally, we will end up the day with another keynote from Dr. Jason Nurse. So this keynote from Dr. Phillippa Spencer will be when we thought cyber science had enough challenges, along come autonomy and AI. Dr. Phillippa Spencer is the 2019 winner of the Woman of the Year, Woman in Defense and Outstanding Contribution to Defense Awards. Phillippa has been cited for her work as polymath, applying mathematical and statistical thinking across a number of areas in cybersecurity and AI. Her analyses are used amongst healthcare workers in Sierra Leone for Ebola outbreak. She was also a key subject matter expert in bringing the F-35 fighter into service. And most recently, Phillippa was involved in the cleanup of Salisbury following the Novichok incident. And Phillippa has been part of DSTL for 17 years. So welcome, Phillippa, and thank you for presenting to cyber science. And the floor is yours whenever you want to start.
Okay, thank you very much for that introduction. And I'd like to thank you all for organizing this and for people to still attend. It's important that even though we're in lockdown, that we still share our science and come together as a group, even though it's all virtual at the moment. So yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity. Hopefully my talk will be interesting. Let's see if I can actually make it work. And it's not working. I can't get the slides to move.
All right.
Really sorry, everybody. We've had some technical difficulties.
There we go.
Okay, so while I'm trying to make the slides move, there we go. So hi, everybody. I'm Phillippa Spencer. I'm a senior principal statistician at Defense Science and Technology Laboratories. I reside in the Cyber and Information Systems at DSTL. For those of you who don't know what DSTL is, we are the first port of call for S&T advice for the armed forces, and we are part of the Ministry of Defense. As a statistician in that organization, my work is incredibly varied. As you saw from that intro, that very kind intro, that I work across a number of different sciences, including cyber, but at the moment I've been up working late nights helping out with the COVID response, as a lot of people are at the moment across government. DSTL is made up of 3 main sites, Portsdown West, Porton Down being the most famous. I believe if anyone's watching television at the moment, the Novichok poisonings drama is on, so Porton Down was very much part of that. And we also have Fort Halstead down in Kent. And I'm going to talk to you today about autonomy and AI and potentially the new challenges it presents to us as cyber scientists and scientists in general. So we've come a long way in cyber science and computing. Early tools were used in 300 BC in Babylon for counting. The first geared counting clock, Shepard's clock, was invented in 1623. You can see there on my slides, we have the difference machine from Chris Babbage. And we've moved then through the years as we go from counting machines into highly complex computers. HP, for example, Hewlett-Packard started in about 1939, I think, with its first computer coming out in 1966. Computing may be working at exponential rates. We all have smartphones now. I'm zooming to you from a laptop as you watch live streaming on YouTube, but cyber science itself and cybersecurity is much younger in terms of its advent. A fun fact, the word cyber comes from the term cybernetic, which is a Greek word for skilled in steering or governing. And that's exactly what we do. We steer and govern the cyber science and the use of computers. Cybersecurity started really with a chap called Bob Thomas, who showed that it was possible for a computer program to crawl across networks. That was called Creeper, which I have a little picture of there. Following on for that, the person who invented email created Reaper, which was to chase and delete Creeper as it moved across the network. But by the mid-80s, computer viruses were less of an academic prank and more of a serious threat. And so we as a community have many challenges ahead of us as we try and steer and govern how computing power is used across the world. And then if that wasn't enough, we have the rise of autonomy. Now, autonomy is something that has been conceptualized for decades. I mean, the idea that machines can take over and make our lives easier is one of the wonders that we bring forward. Today's technology, perhaps future technology, that will help us not drive so much, make our lives easier, give us more time to think, perhaps more time to do science. They have moved from the realm of science fiction to a very real possibility during the past 20 years, largely due to the rapid developments of radar technology and microprocessing capacity. Computers are smaller and lighter, processing power is becoming less of a burden. Portable technology has sufficiently advanced to allow the ultralight hardware to make decisions. You see the drone there at the bottom. I think it's my left, it might be your right. These are easily attainable machines that we can use sometimes for fun, but sometimes not necessarily being used for fun. Decisions can be made in real time, and in some cases, technology can be relatively cheap to produce, which means that autonomy is with us now, but what does it mean for cyber defense? It's put the definition below there that the autonomy is the characteristic ability of a system to decide its own course of action and to achieve defined outcomes. How do we protect and how do we understand a cyber system such as that? So this is a view of ROS, which is Robotic Operating Systems. The global market for this sort of thing is about 260 billion US dollars, I believe. By 2024, it's estimated that this will exceed 3 trillion US dollars. This makes autonomous systems a really big deal. One thing with autonomous systems is that they need to be trained and they need to be tested. Simulation is often used in testing, but isn't necessarily a way of us understanding all the cyber facets that might be problematic when we roll out autonomy. Simulation can save cost and is easier to test scenarios without a safety concern, but how does that translate to the real world? Also, scenarios can be replayed to check the consistency of the actions, but again, in simulation, does it really give us a proper view of the world in which autonomy might live? The middle picture is from a simulation of autonomous driving solution. On the left is a physical testbed for a representative system. This allows easy visualization of the system's action in response to input. Autonomy vehicle testbeds are very few, but they are being produced in order to understand the safety and security aspects of autonomy. This year, both Volvo and Ford committed to testing these on Chinese roads. However, there are several complexities to this work. The different vendors are all trying to solve autonomy problems, for the most part, separately. Rostier, V, Autoware, Baidu, Apollo Auto. This has all led to non-uniform solutions. Even with a particular system, there are typically several versions and often different variants within one given system. And then, of course, because of that, there are varying solutions to security of these wonderful advents of technology. And then because of this, we have the rise of AI. Now I say ish because though there is a great exponential climb to artificial intelligence, but there are many definitions of intelligence, but in this case, we'll just stick to what the standard AI is, which is the ability of machines to perform tasks normally requiring human or biological intelligence. It's goal-directed, adaptive behavior. And again, just like with autonomy and computing, the concept of superintelligent human beings exists across human history. In 1950, Alan Turing predicted this and developed a Turing test as a way of identifying machines that had intelligence indistinguishable from humans. I worry more about the computer that fails the Turing test, to be honest. The combination of computational power and the reinvigoration of artificial neural net research in the 2000s saw an exponential rise in breakthroughs in imagery analysis, medical AI, natural language processing. These are really powerful mathematics. But a lot of the time, AI can be considered a black box. And if you don't always understand what it's doing, how can we truly reap the benefits and understand the security of it? So this is a slide I made myself, so I apologize for the clunky smart art. This is the telltale heart. So at the heart of robotic autonomous systems, so physical systems such as the drones, the above water vehicles, the underwater vehicles, the UGVs, the unmanned ground vehicles, we have algorithms, AI or machine learning, whatever term you want to use for it. It feeds intelligence systems, so virtual and cyber systems, and it feeds data science. So, it's really brought on the amount of insight that we can extract from large data sets. The data is incredibly important. As you can see there behind the heart, it feeds the heart. And what this blue jagged cloud around it is meant to represent is the software around it, which often can be forgotten about when people get excited about AI and autonomy. So I like this particular quote, when functionality is all that matters, security is often overlooked. And that is very true when it comes to autonomy and AI. We've often seen people get a neural net to perform to 98% of classifying things, but we don't always quite understand the security of its ability to process that data and what challenges that can bring to cybersecurity, as well as the benefits that we try to realize as scientists. So this is just a reminder of all the components that might be found within an autonomous system. It can represent a car, an autonomous car. So we've got the sensing data there that feeds into the pathfinding or route finding algorithms. They're then fused with a pre-trained model and some other sense data from other sensors that might be on your autonomous system. That enables a classification algorithm such as a neural net. Oh, don't know why that's done that. Algorithm that then can feed into what the car is actually seeing and trying to make decisions. It pulls on world knowledge, and then you get a response from that autonomous vehicle. So this is quite, though I've simplified it, it can be quite a large publishing, messaging, scribe system that is passing data back and forth throughout the system, sensing data, training data, world knowledge data, and it's all wrapped within a software package that's supposed to protect it and enable that autonomous vehicle to do what it's supposed to do, or what we've trained it to do. So I'm going to talk us through about three themes that I've come across in my own research, and I'm probably telling you things that you already know about challenges that we have with autonomy and AI. They're exciting challenges. So I'm not just all doom and gloom. This is an exciting field for us to contribute to. But I'm not entirely convinced sometimes that we all are cognizant of these particular three themes. I'm sure there are more themes, but these are the three themes that I tend to concentrate in my own research. So I ought to say that even though I am a senior principal statistician at DSTL, my role also includes to be the principal technical authority for autonomy vulnerabilities. So the first one that I want to talk about, and I don't have very exciting slides for this, is data security. Data security in cyber science has always been a problem. It's a problem in the real world. We often see in the newspaper, situations where things have been hacked and data has been released when it's not supposed to, despite commercial off-the-shelf firewalls and bespoke commercial cyber defense systems or cyber protection systems. Data is able to be hacked at and being able to put it out there. When it comes to autonomy and artificial intelligence, we don't always know how much data we need to prepare autonomy for the real world, which means we don't always know how big a capacity we need in terms of how we need to store that data and protect that data. We're still researching how much data is needed to make artificial intelligence robust and prepare it for the next thing it's going to see. I mean, if I hold this up, we will all recognize this as a pen, but would a classifier necessarily recognize it as a pen if I put it against, say, one of those amazing 10 colored pens that we used to get when we were kids, or a highlighter? Our brains are very clever that way, but how do we make AI able to do the same sort of thing, and how much data do we have to put into it to make it able to do that? And do we even need to? However little or a lot of data we need to find ways of protecting it. And I really feel that this is a continual challenge for cybersecurity. An example that is a problem with data and protecting data is backdoors. Now, there's a lot of information on backdoors in the open source literature. Excuse me a minute, my throat's dry. It's, I wouldn't say it's easy to do this, but it can be done, and we've seen it done. So modifying the data that a model is trained on, you can introduce backdoors. So a backdoor is a trick that you can put in that, when stimulated, can change the classification output of an algorithm. Model will behave normally until that stimulation known only to the attacker is used. It's very hard to detect when you have backdoors in your systems, and it's like having a key but not knowing what door that opens, if you can even find the key in the first place. I mean, we've seen examples with the self-driving cars where a backdoor can be triggered to make a stop sign seem like a speed limit sign, and that can have real risk to life challenges that we need to protect our data against. There are lots of papers on backdoors out there. I humbly suggest, if you're not all familiar with them, that you read them, because firstly, mathematically, it's fascinating, but secondly, it really provides that extra level of challenge that we are actively researching within DSTL to find a way of actually combating that and harden our system against those. My next theme is cybersecurity. So because as I go back to that quote about functionality can often be deemed as more important as than security, we have found in some of our systems that poor cyber hygiene is common in immature and new combinations of technologies. Most of these systems use controller area network, we call it CAN bus, as a protocol, especially in vehicles, and can often be insecure. I mean, nearly all of these self-driving cars have a CAN bus connecting the main components of the engine and the driver cockpit. Additionally, it can be found to have non-existent security. Very easy access point if you wanted to manipulate what the configuration files are telling us. Many publish and subscribe implementations are straightforward to eavesdrop, understand, and influence. They typically use plain text to announce the published topics, making it somewhat trivial to understand what the system can do without a detailed knowledge of the system. And we've often found that they lack security. A malicious node can easily inject false message, including the replay of old messages. And an autonomous system, despite the beating heart of AI under it, may not sense that that is suspicious information because there's nothing in place to harden it against such things. So a challenge I think we have in cybersecurity is, how do we protect against those sorts of new and emerging challenges? at the moment, the current thinking about how we go about dealing with that cybersecurity around autonomy and AI are policy and law. Some countries have taken to legislating that creators, manufacturers of autonomous vehicles have to have standards of security testing. In the UK, we have the National Cyber Strategy, which advocates more research into this sort of challenge, and also advocates the trials and testings to a certain level. The DFT and CP&I's key principles for privacy and cybersecurity also advocate the same thing. But then when is enough testing enough? I don't think we still have a handle on what point do we stop that testing? At what point are we able to say, actually, we've tested it so much that there will be no backdoor, or we've tested it so much that we are absolutely sure that the publish and subscribe protocols can defend against any sort of malicious attack. So though these laws and policies are really important, they should be hooks to help us drive our research. Hardening systems against these sorts of attacks are absolutely vital. And I think, we could be more creative in terms of how we look at hardening it. So limiting access points might actually just be a simple matter of encouraging manufacturers and testers to make sure that their cyber hygiene is up to standard. We could look at AI boosted techniques. So, an artificial intelligence algorithm that could crawl over a system and identify points of vulnerability is definitely a good idea. Dynamic honeypot generation might help the fact that the algorithms such as reinforcement learning are continually bringing in data and updating its algorithm. And so the data where it exists might move. So we could move the honeypot for an attacker as well. And then one particular aspect that is quite close to my thinking on things is real-time explainability. So having the ability to see exactly how the system is making its decisions in real time so that we can monitor it. But then that brings itself a new challenge, that if we all had self-driving cars, how would we all monitor the real-time explainability? So the last theme I'm going to talk to is algorithm integrity. So I call it show your workings. Whether you like to call it artificial intelligence or machine learning or maths or algorithms or rules-based decision or fusion, the structure and transparency of the heart of your system is paramount. If you don't know the architecture of your artificial intelligence, how can you be confident in how it's processing the data? It could be doing all sorts of strange things with your data. One example I've seen is from biology, where it was using a gene that was very specific to one particular gender to make decisions on a diagnosis. Therefore, that AI algorithm was only ever going to be biased towards a particular gender and would not be diagnosing the other gender. And that was simply being able to go into that system and look at what data was being used at what layers and what nodes were processing which weights. If you can't show how artificial intelligence is using the data, how can we know the methods needed to secure it? So if we don't know exactly how many layers or how many nodes per layer or what's using what as it goes through, say, a deep learning convoluted neural net, it becomes harder to understand what data could actually poison it. So this is a bad picture. I apologize for that. I thought I'd improved that. Obviously, I hadn't saved the version. But data poisoning, just like backdoors, is something very prolific in the open literature about how neural nets can be vulnerable to adversarial data. At the top, in that sort of squish picture there, we have the classic example. I'm sure lots of people have seen these examples of a turtle being manipulated to be classified as a rifle. Now that's a scary scenario in my head, given that I work in defense. We've also seen an open source algorithm that was supposed to classify things as warplanes, with some data poisoning injected, it could classify that warplane as a dragonfly. Again, that's not a good example of how robust AI can be. I'm sure we've all worried about that. I mean, data poisoning has a term now, but it's always been a problem in terms of running analysis on what we're trying to achieve, whether it's a bias in data or whether it's spurious noise that's being injected from some unknown source that sort of throws our analysis off point. So this isn't a new area, but it's a more pressing area now within artificial intelligence. And I think that if we are able to understand what data is being used throughout the architecture of your AI or machine learning or mathematical model, then you can have the potential then to harden against these sorts of injects of noise. So this is a slide about the fact that an artificial neural network is not magic. It feels like magic to a lot of us, especially when it finally works after months of training. It's just a model. So this is me as a statistician talking that a model such as a neural net or a fusion engine or random forest or a Bayesian network, it's only ever going to be as good as the data and the training regime it has undergone, just like with the autonomous vehicles. Its ability to learn is constrained by its architecture. And so by understanding its architecture and being thorough on the data, we as cyber scientists can protect it, and we know exactly what's going wrong when we see issues such as a self-driving car not recognizing the stop sign and thinking it was a speed sign. One of the ways that we can do explainability, and I appreciate this is a very small neural network, is to visualize it. There are plenty of visualization techniques out there. I could have been clever and used TensorFlow, but I thought I would try and make the point that visualization of neural nets is something that can be done quite simply in R. So I program in R and Python, but this one is done in R, and you can see there that the neural net is taking a number of genes and processing it through a number of layers all the way through to a diagnosis. And you can see, not very well, you'd have to enlarge it to see the interconnectivity between the layers and the nodes. And actually you can extract the weights and you can extract the activation functions in order to understand it. Now, I appreciate that this neural net is something that I've created myself. What happens if we have a neural net that someone else has created, a manufacturer, perhaps industry, who would perhaps not provide such explainability to us? And so it becomes almost like a black box. But there are also methods for that to a certain extent as well, but I'll come on to that in a bit. So if you can extract the weights, there are methods out there, and I've forgotten them for now. I will, if anyone wants to email me later, I'll send you some papers on methods about actually extracting the variables of importance from the neural net that might be actually driving its decisions. So I guess, again, we have genes, but those genes could very easily be features from an image. And I appreciate that I've simplified this for this talk, and obviously a deep learning convoluted neural net would be far more complex in its variables of importance structure. But the point is it can be done. You can see here that we have a measure of importance on the axes there, and each feature of the neural net being measured in terms of its use across the neural net. And I think this could apply to reinforcement learning as well. I haven't tried it on that, but there's no reason why it couldn't be in order to understand exactly how a neural net is using the data, what variables are driving it. And then we can do a sensibility check as well in terms of like, is that the right piece of data to be driving the neural net? Is it using that feature correctly? Or is it using that feature in a way we didn't understand? And boom, we've got new science and innovation. we also can use rule derivation. So in the 90s, there was a lot of work done on understanding neural nets in terms of what exactly the activation functions were doing. How do we represent that? There's a whole wealth of literature on this. I've used Taylor decomposition myself, and I've also used activation maximization. I haven't used symbolic rules and decision trees or M&N rule extraction as much, but they're very effective tools for actually getting into understanding exactly how your neural net works, and bringing out for you a level of insight that allows you to then go, okay, I need to harden this aspect of my neural net because that variable it's using I know has incredible amounts of noise associated with it. So that could easily throw off its classification. Further, you could reduce your neural net's computational burden by going, actually, it doesn't need to be using that piece of data because that piece of data doesn't make a lot of sense. And I need to take that out and go and look at it. And we've done that, and it's very effective. So to summarize, I appreciate that's a lot, 3 themes: data security, cybersecurity, and algorithm integrity. But those are 3 areas that we as cyber scientists can meet the challenge of cybersecurity of autonomous vehicles or autonomous systems or intelligent systems, or just the artificial intelligence that we're messing around with in the lab. So, awareness is very important. Policy and law can help drive our research, or at least give us a justification for our research. Not repeating the mistakes that we made in the past. A lot of software vulnerabilities are classified and catalogued, I think, in many documentations, and so we can just encourage people who are generating these to not repeat those vulnerabilities and patch them if they're already patched. And so we can concentrate then on the more challenging nuances that these systems give us. We need more effort in cyber science research into this area, I think, but then I'm biased. My AI is biased on that. And also, I really think that AI transparency is paramount to us trusting the AI, understanding the AI, and being confident that we can protect it from data poisoning and backdoor attacks. So thank you very much for letting me talk. I think I'm ahead of time, so that means there's lots of time for Q&A if I can answer those questions. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Phillippa, for this very interesting talk. We do have indeed a number of questions. So our first question from Josh Sipper is, how do you see nascent technologies such as nanomaterials and quantum computing driving AI and autonomous agents?
Well, I think that we have the next step, which is neuromorphic computing, which will allow us to do much more with these sort of machine learning technologies. And I think quantum computing will take it to the next level. Nanomaterials potentially could provide a vast new area of sensor feed into the AI behind an autonomous vehicle. So I think it will take it to the next level, is what I would say. But I go back to as well that if we can't protect what we have now, nanotechnology and quantum computing may leave us on catch up even more.
All right. So our second question is from Hanan Hindi. Thank you for this very interesting talk.
You're welcome.
What are your thoughts on the transparency and explainability of AI models versus black box usage of AI models, which is now a research focus in certain domains?
So I think we need both. So white box versus black box, I think, is what we refer to it, but it's all about transparency. So with the explainability of AI, we can't possibly hope to tackle a black box if we can't explain something that we have that we've built ourselves. So I think for a lot of us, me personally, has been my journey is to go back to the fundamentals of a neural net and actually pull out exactly how it's working, and then seeing how I can generalize those to the behavior of a black box. So I think work on generalization will really help if we're able to go back to the fundamentals of how we extract information from a neural net.
All right. So we then have a question from Dr. Cyril Anrobico. What are some of the things that we can do to address data poisoning in AI systems?
Oh, that's a good question. They're all good questions, by the way. So hardening techniques, there aren't that many out there. I mean, I think generally what people start to do is constrain the algorithm's ability to process certain features that might be noisy. But then, you know, we might be missing a trick there. We might be missing useful information that takes AI to the next level, or even helps the autonomous vehicle make better decisions. So I think constraining the architecture or not allowing it data that is noisy is probably not the best thing to do if you're wanting to really push the boundary. I would suggest that hardening techniques can be like training your data to understand noise and providing that classification box for it. So, you know, for example, if you have a neural net that is classifying things like, oh, that is a human and that is a stop sign, giving it the classification abilities to say, this is noisy data, I can't make a decision on this, I need to pass it through. Then the other thinking I had was if we could use sort of so just not just artificial neural nets, but add lessons in from fusion or decision theory, whereby we could allow it to go, oh, I've classified it as this, is this correct, and be able to have some probabilities associated with it to enable it to actually be more effective against sort of data poisoning. Backdoors are harder. I'm not sure I have an answer to that, I'm afraid. I think I'll just sort of default to data security, which I know is a bit of a cop-out, but I don't really have any good thinking on backdoors at the moment, I'm afraid, sorry.
I think to come back to one of your points, it will be quite important to have like some context into data. Don't you think? Like one of the big lack of machine learning at the moment is this context. What's happening outside of just the data that we've got, and how can an autonomous, like for example, an autonomous vehicle decide something without the full context or the full history?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And, you know, then the challenge is like, how do we enable something like a neural net or a random forest to actually encompass that sort of information? Because that's how we operate, right? It's a learning thing. And what training data do we have to recognize different trees from each other, and in what, you know, why a tree shouldn't be in a desert sort of thing? Yes, I completely agree. And I think it's an interesting mathematical challenge.
Then we've got a follow-up from Cyril Anrobico, which says, following your concerns with AI black box issues, what are your takes with AutoML and various other commercial providers of Auto AI?
I have a lot of concerns with people that are claiming that things need to be black box and have proprietary. At the end of the day, you shouldn't be able to IP maths. Trust me, I've tried a lot. I have a lot of concerns with people claiming that, you know, you can't have the source code, or you can't have the maths that actually drives this algorithm. Yeah, that's kind of where I sit on that, is that we shouldn't need to necessarily have to create tools for things that we're buying without knowing exactly what's on the tin.
And then we've got a comment from Martin Yatun. Have you looked into the work done by Gary McGraw at Berryville Institute of Machine Learning?
I have not. I would appreciate a link to that.
So he's actually shared a link. So I'll share the link with you right after this talk.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
And then we've got another question from Mohamed Saidi. Great presentation. Many thanks. Regarding autonomous driving and platooning use cases, what technology and algorithm can we use for cybersecurity?
Yeah, so that again, that's a really good question. I'm not entirely sure I have all the answers to that. My suggestion is I don't want to put AI on top of AI, but if we can use some sort of algorithmic approach to helping us understand the variability within the system and identify the vulnerabilities and almost I don't want to say adversarial machine learning, but defensive machine learning to patch that would be one way that I would like to see it happen. Because though real-time explainability is a wonderful idea and can be done, we couldn't do it for a whole fleet of cars. I mean, who has the cognitive power to be able to watch that and understand what each car is doing in all the different scenarios, going back to context and background. So and then the base tools that we have is just to make sure that people are meeting standards of V&V and testing, so that we know that some of the problems that we have within cyber vulnerabilities are not born from problems that we already know how to fix. These should be interesting new challenges that we're approaching. I'm also a big advocate of game theory to understand cyber risk, but that's just me.
No, I think they both work really well together. So Cyril says thanks, and he agrees with you on the previous questions and answers that you've provided. And he's well, it's always good, isn't it? And he says, like, he mentions like AI democracy, and is this something that is becoming more and more important, like having like a regulatory body for AI and making sure that we get like explainable AIs across the board?
I think so, because I think it shouldn't fall to one particular body like that. So Department for Transport, for example, or it's got such a broad scope. We're using these tools in lots of different areas of our lives now, that we do need a governing body, I think. I obviously, that's my personal opinion, not DSTL's opinion, but I think we do need oversight and someone also to push the research into the academic community of the challenges that I've talked about. Because I'm getting the feeling from some of the questions that you're agreeing with me that these are challenges, and we need more effort put into them before we start, jumping to the next level where we're always on catch up.
So I think that the follow-up question from Arno is quite in line. What changes do we need in legislation for having a smooth integration of these new technologies in our lives?
I think they need to be more specific about the things that we're talking about here. So at the moment, the legislations that are in existence, sort of, they mention autonomy and they mention AI, but they don't actually go as far to say to what standard should we be testing, and then a link to said standard, or how explainable your AI needs to be before it's implemented and put out there in the public domain. Those sorts of things. So I think it just needs to go a little bit a step further with actually being more prescriptive in what it needs to see from these people that's producing things. And we can do that as well among the academic community. I'm suddenly becoming part of the academic community now, but we can start saying what should be needed and understanding what metrics we can put around, reinforcement learning. How much context, as you said, an algorithm needs before we're comfortable with the decisions it's making. That's what I would like to see, and I think it's coming.
All right, and then we've got one more question from Ahmed Haris. Thank you for the talk. Could you elaborate more on dynamic honeypot generation and reinforcement learning?
So dynamic honeypot generation is just an idea that I've had. I'm sure other people have had it as well. I'm not claiming that. But we've used honeypot generation to confuse malicious attackers who are after our information or we've seen it used in industry and in literature and in academia. There's something there, I think, that we could do. So rather than generating it, if we had some information or a way of understanding how a multi-agent attack might come onto a system against sort of something like reinforcement learning, we could be moving the honeypot as it thinks it's finding it. And there are techniques like game theory that could be used for that, or swarming algorithms is also a way of doing that as well. But it's just idea. I've never actually implemented that in anger. It's just scribbles on my whiteboard.
All right, perfect. So we don't have any more questions for now. So it's the right time. If you've got one more question for Phillippa, it's the right time. Yeah, like it was a great talk, and I think we've all learned from this. It's very good to have your views on all of these issues and challenges essentially that we need to solve before we can move forward. Because as you said, there's a lot of new technologies coming, but we've got to first solve the challenges from the start. So we don't have any more questions. So thank you, Phillippa, again for this fantastic keynote. And